The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. So I rise tonight in adjournment proceedings to have another go at the question that I asked on May 30th. I talked about the fact that when fully implemented, the carbon tax is going to be 41 cents a litre, and they've got a new carbon tax in the guise of fuel regulation that'll add another 17 cents. GST, of course, is going to be added to both of those, bringing us up to 61 cents. And I pointed out that Canadians can't afford an extra 61 cents on a litre of gasoline. This doesn't even just affect Canadians that drive a car. This fuel makes public transit more expensive and makes municipalities that run vehicles more expensive. But the response was quite striking, Madam Speaker. The member got up, the minister actually got up and talked about an entire answer that brought natural disasters, fires and floods into the response, as if to say that Canadians have to pay this tax in order to stop hurricanes and forest fires, Madam Speaker. So to bring that kind of political answer is just ridiculous. And we've heard this over and over again, that the claim that to oppose a tax on the basic necessities of life that all Canadians need is somehow to be, it's like our fault for asking the question that devastating forest fires and deadly weather events happen. Well, Madam Speaker, how high does the carbon tax have to be? At what point will we solve a century of forestry mismanagement and the mismanagement of culling pine beetled trees that allow for these tinderbox conditions to arise? How high will the tax have to go if the carbon tax is the solution? It staggers the imagination, and it's deeply offensive to Canadians who can't afford they can't afford to live, Madam Speaker. Rent has doubled. The down payment to buy a home has doubled. Mortgage payments have more than doubled. Groceries are out of control. The cost of heating a home, Madam Speaker, is beyond what many Canadians can pay. And the new carbon taxes on fuel will add 61 cents a litre. Canadians can't afford these expenses. And for the minister to get up and lecture me, lecture the opposition benches, and in so doing, really lecturing every Canadian that has to pay these taxes, to tell them that it's their duty to pay these taxes because this tax is responsible for these catastrophic and complicated events, Madam Speaker. To trivialize things like forest fires and wildfires by simply making it a matter of accepting a carbon tax is very disappointing. So I ask again, when will this government make life a little bit more affordable to Canadians and repeal these punitive taxes?
Good question.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Climate and Environment and Climate Change, and to the Minister of Sports and Physical Activity.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's an honour to rise on behalf of the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change this evening to talk about our plan to fight climate change and ensure affordability for Canadians. And before I start, Madam Speaker, I spent my summer in my riding with my constituents, asking them and talking to them about how we can help more, because things are expensive these days. And when I wasn't meeting with my constituents and hearing from them, I was discussing the issues with economists, with experts, with researchers, and I was delving into the PBO report a little bit. And one thing that I did not hear from any constituents this summer was that they would like us to do less to fight climate change. And, fighting climate change requires more than just one approach. Certainly, pricing carbon is a necessity. It's one that has won a Nobel Prize in economics. I don't have a Nobel Prize in economics. I don't know if my colleague opposite has a Nobel Prize in economics, but the gentleman who does, his name's William Nordhaus, and he won that for demonstrating clearly that if you want to fight climate change from an economic perspective, then market-based instruments like carbon pricing are an absolute necessity. Now, what my colleague opposite referred to as trivializing a natural disaster, there's actually a scientific straight line between burning more fossil fuels, emitting more carbon pollution, and increasing heat in northern boreal forests, and the prevalence, intensity, and duration of forest fires. It's not something that really can be debated. Like, climate change is having an impact on the severity of these forest fires, and we just had the worst year on record. So it goes hand in hand. We want to fight climate change because we want families to be safe in their homes all year round. We don't want to have to evacuate far northern communities for weeks on end for fear that climate change will ruin their community. And you're right. You know, my colleague is right. There are other ways to fight forest fires through forest management strategies, through having a better response to natural disasters. It doesn't change the fact that if you want to fight climate change, then we need to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. Canada's population is 0.5% of the global population, and we're responsible for 1.5% of global emissions. Simple math tells us that as a result, we are 3 times the average. Individuals in Canada create 3 times as much pollution as the global average. That should tell any Canadian something, that we have work to do as Canadians. We should be stewards of the environment, stewards of the climate, and every young person that I meet with in my riding or in Alberta, I spent some time in Alberta this summer, young people want us to focus on fighting climate change. But unfortunately, all day today, we didn't hear any other ideas from Conservatives. We just heard them say axe the tax. That's their strategy. That's their new bumper sticker. That's their new T-shirt that the member from Carleton goes around wearing. However, that's an irresponsible thing to say if you don't have an alternative, because the Conservative Party hasn't put forth a plan to fight climate change or reduce our emissions. They just use vague terms like technology. However, Madam Speaker, I have a question for my colleague. I hope he'll indulge me. I've done my best. I've skipped the notes. I didn't read the speech. I listened intently to his speech. My question to him is, in an alternate universe, back in 2021, say Aaron O'Toole had won that election, and the member opposite from Calgary Rocky Ridge was, say, the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change, or perhaps the Minister of Transport. Would he follow through on his commitment, as he ran on in 2021, to price carbon in Canada?
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, after the next election, when we are on the other side there, the member, if he is re-elected, will have an opportunity to ask questions of a future Conservative government. But tonight is where opposition members ask questions of the government. And if I am to take the point that he made in his response, which was that that the carbon tax, that fighting climate, that we are not fighting climate change, and that the carbon tax is a successful policy instrument in fighting climate change. I might be prepared to accept his full argument, but the carbon tax has not allowed for Canada to meet any of its emissions targets. We are not controlling emissions or reducing emissions through the carbon tax. All the carbon tax is doing is making life more expensive for Canadians who can't afford to eat, heat, and afford groceries.
The honourable parliamentary secretary.
Madam Speaker, that's actually not true. Canada's emissions have fallen, and Canada's emissions per GDP have fallen dramatically, in fact, and it is a result of action by this government. However, there's a lag period as well, because the previous government did almost nothing to fight climate change. They thought it was a big joke. The Harper government referred to the Kyoto Protocol as a socialist regime. Madam Speaker, we still have a long way to go in this country, but I think it's going to take a concerted effort on behalf of each member of Parliament to listen to people in their riding who are actually experts, economists, experts on affordability, and experts on fighting climate change, to develop a strategy that works for all Canadians. Now, back to the issue of affordability, Madam Speaker, for just a second. I happened to have a look at the PBO report, and I noted that the bottom 3 quintiles of earners in Alberta net out to more money through the climate action incentive payment than they pay. Those are the most vulnerable Canadians. Those are the people who need it most, and they're getting more money back because the top 2 quintiles, the 4th and the 5th quintiles, they burn more fossil fuels. Thank you, Madam Speaker.